Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
We're also keeping an eye on prediction markets, especially in the context of war. Traders on Kalshi and Polymarket debated and bet on Iran's future. Markets responded to news of U.S. and Israeli forces bombing Tehran. Kalshi froze a market on whether the Ayatollah would be out as supreme leader, citing rules that markets cannot be tied to death, and reimbursed traders for fees and net losses after some objected to the resolution. We got Chris Beam back with us. He's contributor to Bloomberg Businessweek. He's also the author of the cover story of the current issue of Bloomberg Businessweek. It's about how Polymarket and Kalshi are gamifying the truth. He joins us from New York. Chris, what are you allowed to, in the context of a conflict, what are you allowed to bet on Kalshi and Polymarket?
Well, there's very different answers for each platform.
And explain why that is.
So fundamentally, Kalshi is a U.S. company that is registered with the CFTC. And so every market that appears on Kalshi needs to adhere to U.S. law. Polymarket is slightly more complicated. It does have a U.S. entity, but you can only bet on sports on the U.S. platform. The vast majority of Polymarket's trading happens on its international platform, which is outside the jurisdiction of the CFTC.
And who regulates that? If it's not the CFTC regulating that, who regulates that?
Well, it depends on, it's every other country where people are trading. So that platform is technically based in Panama, so it does have to follow some Panamanian law. But the laws that apply to the platform often are in the countries of where the traders are located, not where the business itself is located.
So when we have...
I'm sorry I interrupted you so many times. You couldn't even answer the question.
So when we have exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange or ICE, like Intercontinental Exchange, when they're lining up with these companies or doing deals or collaborations, as the NYSE is doing with Polymarket, they're basically, though, partnering with a company that does a lot of sports gambling, right?
Well, that is certainly how a lot of critics of the prediction market platforms are framing it. They see trading on prediction markets as no different from sports gambling, whether you're betting on sports itself or other topics. The way that these companies see it is that you're trading what they call event contracts, and that's very different from gambling for all sorts of technical reasons. But when it comes to these war markets, I mean, you raise an interesting point. Like, are some of the more traditional financial organizations like Intercontinental Exchange, which has partnered with Polymarket, are they going to have a problem with platforms, allowing people to bet on war or, which leaders will be deposed? That's why you've seen such a different reaction from these two different companies. Kalshi has kind of bent over backwards to say, we're not letting people bet on death one way or the other. That's why they froze the market on the supreme leader of Iran once it became clear that he was dead. Mm-hmm. In Polymarket's case, because all of these war markets that we're talking about are overseas and have nothing to do with what is or is not allowed in the U.S., my guess is that Intercontinental Exchange and others are just treating it as a completely separate company that doesn't involve them.
So like a firewall, but it is still the same company, correct?
So it is essentially a firewall where Americans are geo-blocked from trading on Polymarket's international platform. So if you wanted to illegally trade on Polymarket's international platform, you would need a VPN. And that's definitely happened. Americans have done that, but it's technically against the law. In the case of, are they separate companies? Yes. But they both operate out of Polymarket's New York headquarters. And they both have the same social media presence. So you can be forgiven for being a little confused.
Would Kalshi benefit from having from being outside of being regulated by the CFTC rather than being here in the United States? Like, would they benefit from structuring like Polymarket?
That's a really good question. I think the two companies are taking very different strategies. Kalshi probably sees operating in the US, following the rules, welcoming regulation as a path to winning in this space. It's just a very different path from Polymarkets, where the vast majority of the activity is happening overseas, and their business model is therefore likely to be different in the long term.
Oh, okay.
So, but still on Polymarket in the US, a lot of it is sports, right? And still sports. And can I say gambling? Like, I'm not even quite sure. Is it correct to say that?
So the answer to your first question is you can only bet on sports on Polymarket's US platform.
Okay.
That's the only type of wagering, betting, gambling, whatever you want to call it, that's allowed. They say that they are going to add other categories like politics or entertainment, but they haven't done that yet. The problem is, as far as what to call it, I've seen Tarek Mansour, the CEO of Kalshi, say that he's comfortable with the word betting. He's less comfortable with the word gambling. So I guess Kalshi tries to draw a line there, saying betting could just be a synonym for, predicting, whereas gambling has different implications about the odds and the role of the house or the bookie and how much of a cut they take.
Yeah, that's a good point, because these are yes, nos. And you've explained this to us in the past when we've interviewed you. Because these are yes, nos, there's not the same sort of like the house always wins when it comes to gambling. Hey, insider trading on these. Kalshi was in the news last week because it said it fined and banned 2 traders who violated Kalshi's rules. This seems like it's going to become a growing problem, not just on Kalshi, but also on Polymarket. How are they policing this?
Yeah, so Kalshi has been very proactive, I would say, about saying that they're addressing insider trading. They're surveilling traders and using algorithms to detect patterns that suggest that someone might have insider information. And then, as you said, they've announced some cases where they've actually cracked down on insider trading and fined people. And they claim that they've sent more than 200, they've investigated more than 200 cases. How that compares to the extent of the problem, we don't really
200
know.
Seems like a small number.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it does. And what's interesting is that Polymarket, for its part, doesn't really talk about this at all. When I was working on the piece a few weeks ago, Polymarket did not respond to questions about insider trading. And the big headlines that you see generally, insider trading on the Iran attack market, on the Maduro market a few weeks ago. Those are almost all on Polymarket because you're not seeing any regulation there. And there seems to be very little appetite to actually do anything about it.
I feel like every time we have these conversations, Chris, it just reminds me that at some point, I think regulators are going to have to come in at some point and kind of figure this out, and just got about 20 seconds, 25 seconds.
Yeah, and it depends what kind of regulator. The current chairman of the CFTC says he wants to regulate this, but it's unclear what he's actually going to do.